Hello, Dr. Laitman. Hello, hello. As we all know, the embryo is the very first degree of a person's spiritual development. Dr. Laitman, not only spiritual, but also in this world. Host, right, we'll draw a parallel between how an embryo or a fetus are born in our world and how does it happen in the spiritual world. And we can learn from one to the other because there's the law of root and branches. So it's the same processes that are going on. How it happens in the corporeal world, we more or less know. So we'd like to ask about how it happens in spirituality. So the first degree of spiritual development, like in the corporeal world, starts with the impregnation, where 10 million sperms have to enter the womb, and there is the impregnation. 10 million you need. Also, in spirituality, I know that we say that 1,000 people go in and one comes out. Is there some kind of correlation? Dr. Layton, no. In spirituality, it's true. Just like in the corporeal, that a person has to go through many different states. And from all of his spiritual states, he has to choose the most correct one. It is similar to how a drop of seed enters in different ways the womb, and in the womb reaches a special place where it could cling to the wall of the womb and begin its development. It is all similar to how a person, not in competition with others, but how a person himself, competing against himself, against his ego, how he's advancing forward persistently, consistently, not allowing himself to deviate from the goal. Even if he falls and he's powerless, nonetheless, he's directed toward the goal. He follows his goal that he needs to reach it, no matter at what speed, pace, regardless of how smart or skilled he is, etc. Anyone, if they make the effort, they'll make it. Host. So 1,000 people, meaning that a person has to go through 1,000 different states, and at a certain point, there's the impregnation, the coming out into the spiritual world, meaning Dr. Laitman. Yes, the first connection of a man and his soul with the Creator. Host, what does he feel in that state? Dr. Laitman, he feels that there is a new quality that appears in him, the quality of bestow, the quality of love, the quality that is above the ego of our world. Host, so he rejects his ego for his own benefit, meaning his own benefit, and okay. In spirituality, there are the 3 days of the absorption of the seed in the womb. Dr. Laitman, maybe not 3 stages, but 3 forces that have to combine and continue their development. It's the right, left, and the middle. I don't want to name them and deepen into this in order not to get us confused, our viewers confused.
Host.
Okay, so the inner uterus development, we know it from the corporeal world. It lasts for about 38 weeks, which is about 9 months. Does it correspond to the 9 Sefirot in spirituality? Dr. Laitman, yeah? The inner uterus development, it actually happens in parallel, if you can say that, and similarity to the development of the spiritual embryo and how he develops on his way This is how the corporeal embryo develops too. Host, what's interesting is in the first 8 weeks, the fetus is called an embryo, and then he's only called a fetus. And in Kabbalah, I know that the process of the forming of the fetus occurs within the first 40 days. Why 40 days? What does a person feel in that state? Dr. Laitman, there are the 3 days, which is the attachment of the seed to the wall of the womb. Afterwards, the 40 days are the initial development of the embryo, and then 3 months of the development of the fetus throughout 9 months. This is how it's divided. We won't get deeper into this, but Dr. Laitman, there are many details here, and there are such parameters in this that we're not even familiar with, that medicine isn't even familiar with. Host, your teacher writes that the Creator, in one of his articles, he says that the Creator puts one form inside the other. Inside our egoistic form, the altruistic form begins to unravel. This is what we're talking about, Dr. Laitman. Yes. In Hebrew, it's tzura betoch tzura, meaning that inside our egoistic desire, out of which we entirely consist, begin to develop altruistic desires, the qualities of love, bestow, sensing the other. Host. So this development, it starts when altruistic qualities begin to develop in us. Dr. Laitman, yes. Host, I know that this process, it is, and you talk about it, that it's accompanied by certain suffering, anger, rage, that a person has to go in faith above reason with his eyes shut. Dr. Laitman, that's at the beginning, and afterwards, it all occurs inside the person, and his constant tension of preserving his intention toward others and intention of love and bestow others and the Creator. Host, it's very hard work to annul yourself toward the upper. What is that exactly? Dr. Laitman, all of these efforts, they occur inside a person. And so it's hard to give an example, Host. But the annulment in relation to the upper force, what is it, Dr. Laitman? Suppressing your ego and gradually rising above it to bestow love and altruism. Host, can you say that when these altruistic qualities are depicted in me, which are opposite to my own, I have to annul myself for the upper to do that on me? So if an ordinary embryo annuls himself in relation to his mother in order to develop, this is something that happens instinctively. Dr. Laitman, obviously, it's done by nature. Host, and we have to do it consciously, and this is the annulment. Dr. Laitman, yes. Host. Many times I heard you say that the inner uterus development is a wonder, the process itself. Why? How? Dr. Laitman, it's because it is the connection of two completely unconnectable parameters of reception and bestow, where the quality of bestowal and love prevails over the qualities of reception, and therefore new life begins to form. This entire process in nature, it's very complex, special, and unnatural. Natural is development, and here what you get isn't development, but the connection of opposites, one inside the other. And therefore, It's a wonder. Host, so in the material world, this I understand. There's like this body that develops inside, like in the organism of the mother, and the organism doesn't reject it. And in spirituality, what's the wonder? Dr. Laitman, in spirituality, it's the same. Because actually, the birth of one organism inside the other occurs on the background of rejection. Host, so that in me there are altruistic qualities that are developing, that's considered a wonder. Dr. Laitman, yeah. Host, that suddenly a person doesn't think about himself. Dr. Laitman, he has to go through all these things and want to accept it all against his own state. In contrast to it, he has to annul himself. Host, it is said that the embryo sees, or the fetus sees the entire world from end to end. Dr. Laitman, it means that he has no limitations, that he is in complete correspondence to the upper existence, the organism of the mother or the qualities of the creator. He does not include, turn any egoistic desires on in himself, but everything that exists, all the opposite things that exist in him that are against the mother, or however you put it, it's all suppressed by the upper system, and therefore he develops inside the mother, and even though that he is in contradiction, he's opposite to her, and there appears certain moments where as if the oppositeness of the mother might bring about a miscarriage to that embryo, but the mother's organism takes it all upon itself and suppresses any oppositenesses between the mother and the embryo continues developing. Host, can we say that all the stages of the development of the embryo, 3 days, the absorption of the seed, 40 days, the impregnation, and the 3 times 3 months, that is all a correction of our ego? Dr. Laitman, of course. Host, so if I correctly understand, the embryo sees from end to end, meaning he sees his entire ego, but can use it only, a very small part of it. Dr. Laitman, he practically doesn't use it at all. He is automatically being fed. He is protected from everything. He has nothing of his own. Host, so he simply annuls himself. Dr. Laitman, a spiritual embryo has to work on annulling himself in relation to what appears in him. And in corporeality, of course, it is all done under the influence of the life of an embryo depends on the umbilical cord, and as it is known from the wisdom of Kabbalah, this is the group. So, the main thing is to not forget that all of the processes that we're talking about now, the entire process of development comes through the group. Dr. Laitman, yes. Host, so, just like a mother feeds her embryo through the umbilical cord, the creator develops a person through the group. Dr. Laitman, actually, maybe not the smaller group, but the surrounding environment. Host, through all of mankind. Dr. Laitman, eventually, yes. Host, still vegetative, animate people. Dr. Laitman, yes. Eventually, it is all a system called one soul. Host, what does a person exactly get from the group? What kind of food? Host, all of the forces that he receives from above, he gets it through the surrounding. It turns out that he is at the bottom of this chain. And through this entire chain, the influence, the root works on him through it. So there's the broader environment, which is the entire world, and there is an environment surrounding, like my relatives, peers, co-workers, and people that want to advance just like I want to in spirituality. Dr. Laitman, they're the ones that are important because in your connection with them, you awaken the upper force for it to start influencing you and develop you. Host, yeah, they develop my desire, my importance for developing. They raise the importance. And what about the rest of the surrounding? Dr. Laitman, it's part of the same soul. That in the meantime, they're not enacted in this directly in spirituality, but gradually, bit by bit, you will see the measure to which together with you, they form this general system called one soul. Host, so the Creator influences them through me? Dr. Laitman, yeah, but indirectly. Host, so it's like those that think like me are my closest environment and that explain to me how to do things, then I'll understand later on why are there 1 billion Chinese people that the Creator influences me through them. Dr. Laitman, yeah?
Дальше. У зародыша нет рта, и он получает...
A fetus has, an embryo has no mouth or fetus, and he gets everything through the umbilical cord, and afterwards, after the birth, his mouth starts working, and it's called in the wisdom of Kabbalah, the Peh of the Partzuf in Hebrew. And it says that there he gets 32 teeth. Dr. Laitman, well, that's way later. Host, yeah, a few stages later, a few years, right? But what's interesting is that the teeth, in spirituality, these are tools that help you scrutinize things, Dr. Laitman, right? Just like our teeth in our organism, they help us chew the food and participate in the process of, consuming the food, molding it. Without that, it's impossible. And animals and fish and you name it, any living being have teeth or something similar in one way or another. Host, so there are 32 teeth and correspondingly the 32 channels of wisdom, of chokhmah. What is the difference between receiving directly through the umbilical cord and when he starts chewing himself, Dr. Laitman? Through the umbilical cord, he gets everything that he's given. No one asks him, what does he need? He completely annuls himself and from above gets everything that there is and is completely content with it. Afterwards, as he grows, his own brain develops consciousness, in the initial stages, and after birth, he already starts rejecting, wanting, not wanting. There are already problems that begin, problems with his organism and with the consumption of food. Host, sometimes I get this association that when a person directly gets from the Creator, is it not some kind of blind faith that I agree to everything that happens to me, Dr. Laitman? Yeah, that's blind faith. I accept everything that comes from the Creator as completely right, correct. Host, it's a very advanced state, had to agree with everything that goes on. Dr. Laitman, the desires are still small, and therefore, afterwards, these desires will grow, and accordingly, the different systems through which a person will annul these desires have to develop too. Meaning above these desires, one way or another, he will cleave to the Creator already with the help of asking, praying, etc. Meaning that he will consciously, not that the upper organism will take everything upon itself in order to annul his ego, but he himself will do it gradually, receiving from the Creator the entire work that The Creator did himself for himself on the early stages of his development. Host, so the further you go, the harder it is to annul yourself in relation to the Creator. Agree with him? Dr. Laitman, yeah, and the ego grows all the time, and the different conditions are developing all the time, such that a person will need to constantly strengthen himself, and that therefore there's need for the guru, for studying. Host, probably like in our world, it's easier for a child to agree with his parents than for a grown-up, etc. Okay. The embryo, he develops with his head up. And this means that he has to all the time raise the importance of the environment of those that are like him, that want to achieve the spiritual goal. And when he's born, he's with the head down. Dr. Laitman, right, completely annulling himself. It's done from above, not the embryo himself does it. He only annuls himself. The upper turns him upside down, meaning everything that he had on the previous degree disappears. He's born. He goes through the birth channels, the umbilical cord is cut, and then he is already considered a newborn and begins to independently already, he begins his path, meaning already annulling himself as much as he can in relation to the upper, in relation or according to the conditions that he discovers in himself and between himself and the upper host. This inner uterus development, the 9 months, there in relation to the embryo, there's no time, no space, and suddenly when a person's born, it's such a different world, such a different existence, where there's air, where he has a mouth. Dr. Laitman, it's a new spiritual degree. Host, when a person's born in spirituality, there's always also such a contrast, or even more. Dr. Laitman, yeah? I don't know how to say about a contrast, but it's a different world, yeah? So it says, I've seen an upside-down world. Host, upside down how? Dr. Laitman, the quality of reception and the quality of bestow switch places. In our world prevails the quality of reception. Host, so that which was important to me becomes non-important and vice versa. Dr. Laitman, yeah. Host, so if in our world I'm important and my self-interest is important in spirituality, Dr. Laitman, bestow that the others are more important than myself. Host, how come others are more important than me? Dr. Laitman, because through them I'm connected to the Creator, and they're the most important part of my soul, and others don't exist altogether. Only I and the Creator, and everything between us is my soul. Host, so I see all the 8 billion people as my true self. Dr. Laitman, yeah? Host, and this is the inverting the opposite. The embryo agrees to everything, accepting it as the best, even though that it's completely opposite to his ego. If the embryo criticizes the food given by the upper, not accepting it as good, then there is a process called miscarriage. What does it mean to criticize the food given by the upper? Dr. Laitman, meaning that he is unpleased with how the Creator treats him. Host, how can a person be, content with it if he's an egoist, Dr. Laitman? But he has a system where he corrects himself. When he asks the Creator to correct him, he does. He takes care of him, feeds him, meaning he develops him correctly. But if nonetheless a person receives these processes that the Creator does on him, and there's no one besides the Creator, then what happens is that between them there's a mismatch, tension, that can also lead to a miscarriage. Host, a miscarriage in spirituality is what? Dr. Laitman, he ceases to be in contact with the Creator, and his entire spiritual essence disappears. Host, terrible. What then? Host, Dr. Laitman, he's left with his corporeal body that lives until a person once again shakes it off, and again starts to aspire to become an embryo. Host, he waits for the next opportunity. Dr. Laitman doesn't wait, he has to act. Host, we know that time and space in spirituality symbolize renewal of form, innovation of form, and in spirituality, the process of it could take 7, 9, 12 months. What is that? Dr. Laitman, these are the same 9 months, only they can be reduced to 7 or extended to 12. Reduced to 7, this is something that we do see in our world. That children 7 months old, 8 months old, children are born and even younger, and where it's overtime, it's due already. This is not good. That can bring to bad results. Therefore, it's not done in our world, but you get a hastening shot, and this way, the embryo is squeezed out, the fetus squeezed out. It's like the host throwing out of his home a guest, throwing out the guest of his home. The host. In Hebrew, chodesh, month, comes from the word chodesh, chidush, innovation. Dr. Laitman, yes, meaning he has completed his main development, chesed, gvura, tiferet, netzach, hod, yesod, and malchut, meaning these are 7 months, and now there are another 2 additional months, which is above the chesed, which are bina and chokhmah, 9 months. And here he is already completely closed, and the only thing missing is to come out of the mother and to start developing. Host, and the keter is not considered. Dr. Laitman, that's the upper. Host, so 9 months, 9 Sefirot. Dr. Laitman, yes. Host, and where does the 12 come from? 12 come from then? Dr. Laitman, well, there are such unique conditions where there are the 12 months periods of the inner uterus development. It's written about it in certain books, in the Talmud, but as something that is out of the ordinary. Also, the development of the fetus means that you go state after state, you develop, and ibul, conception, in Hebrew comes from the word ibul, which also means to cross. Dr. Laitman, yeah, it all comes from the same. Ibul, obal, ovel, conception, embryo, to pass through, host. And also these are degrees of development of the measure to which I can balance out my egoism with the, Dr. Laitman, altruistic intention, host, that the Creator depicts in us. Dr. Laitman, yes, it is the depiction of the correct intentions that are the form of the spiritual fruit. Host, and all of that is possible only through a group of those that want to develop spiritual like you. You can't directly be connected to the Creator. Dr. Laitman, there is no direct connection to the Creator, but only through the group. When we aspire to connect to others, then we generate this condition through which we can communicate or connect to the Creator through. So the Creator is a force that clothes in the group, works on a person. I see. So this was the process of the development of the embryo. Thank you very much for all your explanations, and till next time, all the best.